Okay, so let's talk about using trig, right, to find lengths of sides of right triangles, right? Big deal. So, a little review. Here's a right triangle, right? Two sides are perpendicular, so they form a 90-degree angle, and we represent that 90 degrees by this little square, right? Okay, and then opposite 90 is always the hypotenuse, so this side is called the hypotenuse. And then after that, you need the angle to figure out the other pieces. So if my angle is down here, then opposite that angle is the opposite side, right? Makes sense. And adjacent means next to. So next to this angle is this side. So we call it adjacent, right? This side is next to also, but it's already labeled hypotenuse. So it's hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. And here are our trig ratios. So sine of that angle, theta, is the ratio opposite side over hypotenuse. Right? Cosine is adjacent side over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So it'll give you the ratio of the sides. And these three pretty much give us the ratio, all the ratio of the sides, right? So every side kind of works with the other sides, right? So kind of all the possibilities. All right, so I want you to stop the video, do class problems 1 and 2. After 2, you're going to write down your process, all right? Okay, let's evaluate a trig expression here. So now we're going to do this. So I want to know what cosine of 45 degrees is. So as soon as you see cosine of 45 degrees, you got to be thinking pretty much three things. The first is this represents a right triangle. The second is this angle is 45 degrees. So if I have something like this, as soon as I see cosine of 45, I know it's a right triangle, and I know one of the angles is 45. And it doesn't matter which one I pick, just one of them is 45. And the last part is, put it together, cosine of this, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's going to be a big deal too. All right, but we are going to do a little calculator thing here first. So with your calculator, I want you to type in cosine of 45 degrees and hit enter. All right, and you will get 0.707. All right, so now we know what? We have cosine of 45, and again, that brings up three things. It brings up it's a right triangle, it brings up one of the angles is 45, and it brings up that this ratio, right, or we have adjacent and hypotenuse. So now when I ask you, what does this value represent? Well, it's a cosine of a right triangle, so this value represents adjacent over hypotenuse, right? So the ratio of adjacent and hypotenuse. That's what this value represents. And we've been talking a little bit about this. This is less than 1, so I know the hypotenuse has to be larger than the adjacent, right? Okay, and so in our triangle, I specifically know it's going to be b divided by c is 0.707, okay? All right, so that's what that means. Whenever you hit enter on a trig expression, that's what it is. It's a ratio of sides. That's what that value is. All right, so just to go a step further, well, what are two possible values for b and c? Well, let's figure it out. So I have this again, right? So here's adjacent over hypotenuse is 0.707. And I got this from the calculator. I know adjacent's b, hypotenuse is c. So this means that b divided by c is 0.0707. Well, I just want to isolate. I don't have to isolate anything, but I don't want the denominator there. So I'm going to multiply both sides by c. These c's divide out, and you'll get b equals 0.707 times c. And now we can pick any value we want for b and c as long as, it fits this. So I just made up one. Let's say c is 2. Then 2 times this, b is 1.414. So if we had a hypotenuse of 2 and we had a length of b is 1.414, this angle would be 45 degrees. All right, kind of cool. All right, so let's stop this. And you want to do classwork problem number 3. Okay, so let's take that and now let's use it to determine the side length. So here I have a right triangle, and as soon as you see a right triangle, you have to be thinking sine, cosine, and tangent, because that's right triangle trig, right? Those are our trig ratios for right triangles. So as soon as I see it, I think of sine, cosine, tan. Now I go a little deeper. Now that I know it's trig, sine, cosine, or tan, then I need to start identifying if I have opposites, hypotenuse, adjacents, all that nonsense. So let's start with that. What are we given? Well, we're given, here's my angle, so I'm given an opposite, which is what I want to find, and I'm also given a hypotenuse. So it's opposite and hypotenuse, and I'm given this angle theta. Well, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so if I want to relate this angle to these two sides, I better use a sine. So I'll do sine of the angle, 38 degrees, equals opposite, which is x, all over hypotenuse, which is 20. Okay, so just by knowing right triangles are related through these trig ratios, I could develop this equation, right? Quite powerful. And now, does this look familiar? Yeah, it's exactly what we did just before, right? It's not the same numbers, of course, but it's the same process. I have some number, which I'll get when I do a calculator, and I'll have some ratio, which I have. So I just pretty much evaluate the same way. So I'm going to solve the same way. Okay, so let's take this. I want to get x by itself now, so I'm solving for x. So let's multiply both sides by 20. And then you'll see the 20s divide out here, so I'm left with just an x. And I'm left with a 20 times sine of 38. And we don't put the little dots, we just write them next to it. It means multiplication. Okay, and so now I have 20 sine 38. And this I will do in a calculator. So type in 20 sine 38, hit enter, and you'll get x equals 12.31. All right, and we're going to round, so round to the hundredths. It'll be fine. So what does this mean? It means our triangle, if I have 38 degrees and it's a right triangle, opposite, right, would be 12.31 and hypotenuse would be 20. These two lengths will produce an angle of 38 degrees, all right, in this right triangle. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So you want to complete class problem number 4, and then at the end of that, there's a process. So write down your process.